Imagine standing before an ancient artifact, its surface worn by time, its origins shrouded in mystery. For centuries, questions about who made it, how it was used, or even what it represents have lingered unanswered. But today, thanks to the relentless curiosity of scientists and the power of modern technology, those secrets are finally being revealed. This is the story of how science has pulled back the veil on history, uncovering truths that were once thought lost forever. From long-forgotten civilizations to enigmatic artifacts, the past is speaking to us in ways we never thought possible. And in this video, we're diving deep into 25 astonishing moments where science cracked the code on ancient mysteries. Think about the Rosetta Stone, a slab of rock that sat untouched for centuries until it became the key to unlocking the language of the pharaohs. Or the mysterious Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old device so advanced it was dubbed the world's first computer. These aren't just relics of the past, they're puzzles waiting to be solved. And with tools like carbon dating, DNA analysis, and ground-penetrating radar, researchers are piecing together the stories behind them. It's like watching history rewrite itself in real time as science fills in gaps that once seemed impossible to bridge. What makes these discoveries so thrilling isn't just the answers they provide, it's the way they change how we see our own place in history. Every breakthrough reminds us that the past isn't static, it's alive with clues waiting for the right moment to be understood. So join us as we explore 25 jaw-dropping instances where science turned the impossible into the undeniable. From lost cities rising from the earth to hidden messages decoded after millennia, this is a journey through time, powered by curiosity, innovation, and the unshakable belief that no mystery is too old to solve. The past is talking and science is listening. Buried beneath the waves off the coast of a tiny Greek island for over 2,000 years, a corroded lump of bronze and wood would rewrite history. When sponge divers first pulled the Antikythera Mechanism from a shipwreck in 1901, no one could have guessed this unassuming artifact held the secrets of ancient engineering genius. For decades, its purpose remained a tantalizing mystery until modern science stepped in. By using advanced X-ray imaging and precision three-dimensional modeling, researchers peeled back the layers of time to reveal an astonishing truth. This wasn't just a relic. It was a masterpiece of precision engineering, a celestial calculator so advanced it wouldn't be matched for another 1,000 years. The device's intricate gearwork was nothing short of revolutionary. Tiny interlocking bronze cogs, some just millimeters wide, tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with staggering accuracy. It could predict eclipses, chart Olympic cycles, and even account for the irregular orbit of the moon, a feat of astronomy and mechanics that left modern scientists speechless. Imagine the shock when they realized this wasn't some medieval invention, but a creation from the 1st century before the Common Era, lost and forgotten until chance brought it back to light. What makes the Antikythera Mechanism so breathtaking isn't just its complexity, but what it tells us about the ancient world. This wasn't built in isolation. It hints at a lost tradition of scientific craftsmanship, a level of technological sophistication we never knew existed in that era. The Greeks weren't just philosophers and artists, they were engineers, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with nothing but hand tools and sheer brilliance. Every gear, every inscription whispers a story of curiosity and innovation that echoes across centuries, and thanks to science, that story is finally being heard. The Antikythera Mechanism didn't just surprise us, it shattered assumptions. For generations, historians believed the ancient Greeks were brilliant theorists, but lacked the technical skill to turn ideas into intricate machines. This corroded bronze artifact proved them spectacularly wrong. Its gearwork was so precise, so mathematically sophisticated, that it forced us to reconsider an entire era. Suddenly, the line between ancient and modern technology blurred. Here was a device that wouldn't be rivaled until the astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe, machines built over 1,000 years later. What's even more remarkable is how the mechanism's design mirrors principles we associate with the Renaissance. The differential gear, once thought to be an invention of the 18th century, was hiding inside this 2,000-year-old relic. It's as if Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks had been unearthed, but written by someone centuries before him. This wasn't just a lucky prototype. It was evidence of a thriving tradition of mechanical engineering, one that likely produced other marvels lost to time. Imagine the workshops where craftsmen painstakingly filed these gears, the scholars who calculated celestial motions without telescopes or calculators. Their legacy wasn't completely erased, just waiting for us to rediscover it. The mechanism's true significance lies in the questions it raises. If the Greeks could build this, what else did they create? Ancient texts mention automated theaters, mechanical birds, even primitive steam engines. Stories once dismissed as fanciful myths now demand a second look. Every gear in the Antikythera Mechanism whispers of a forgotten industrial revolution, one that flickered out but left behind clues. It's a humbling reminder that history isn't a straight line of progress. Civilizations rise, fall, and take their secrets with them until science gives us the tools to listen. Perhaps most poignant is how this device reconnects us with its makers. When researchers deciphered the inscriptions on its fragments, they found more than just instructions. They found a user manual, names of planets, markings for athletic games, even a dial tracking the 4-year cycle of the Olympics. This wasn't just a scientist's tool, it was a cultural touchstone, blending astronomy, sport, and religion into a single machine. The past isn't just about dates and artifacts, it's about people. And thanks to this unlikely survivor, we're meeting them again across the centuries in ways they could never have imagined. For over 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript has teased historians, cryptographers, and even wartime codebreakers with its bizarre, undecipherable script. Filled with curling, plant-like letters and strange illustrations of naked women bathing in green liquid, celestial charts, and unidentifiable herbs, this book resisted every attempt to crack its secrets. From medieval alchemists to 20th century intelligence agencies, countless experts declared it a hoax or simply gave up. But then, artificial intelligence stepped onto the scene, treating the manuscript not as a puzzle for human intuition, but as a data problem waiting for machine learning to solve it. By analyzing the manuscript's linguistic patterns with algorithms designed to detect hidden structures, researchers made a startling discovery. The text wasn't random gibberish or an elaborate forgery. Its word frequency, sentence length, and character distribution closely matched known languages, just not the ones scholars had spent centuries searching for. Instead of European ciphers or lost alphabets, the manuscript's statistical fingerprints pointed toward Near Eastern languages, particularly a form of early Turkish. Suddenly, those mysterious botanical drawings took on new meaning. AI suggested they weren't mystical symbols at all, but practical diagrams, possibly a medieval guide to women's health, blending herbal medicine, astrology, and gynecology. What makes this breakthrough so extraordinary isn't just the translation of a few words, but the way it reframes the entire document. For generations, the Voynich Manuscript was dismissed as either a clever fake or an esoteric treatise meant to baffle. Now it appears to be something far more mundane yet profoundly revealing, a specialized medical text, likely written by and for women in a time when such knowledge was often suppressed. Those nonsense labels beside illustrations of plants, they might be practical instructions for remedies. The repetitive phrases once thought to be incantations could be dosage guidelines or symptom descriptions. The irony is delicious. A book once considered the epitome of obscurity might actually be a practical manual hiding in plain sight. This revelation also underscores how much we've underestimated pre-modern scientific writing, especially works by or for women. The manuscript's proposed origin in 15th century Anatolia aligns with historical records of female herbalists and midwives who recorded their knowledge in vernacular languages, not the scholarly Latin of male physicians. If AI is correct, the Voynich Manuscript isn't a riddle to be solved. It's a snapshot of marginalized expertise, preserved precisely because its coded nature kept it safe from destruction. Every failed decoding attempt over the centuries says less about the text's obscurity and more about our own biases, our expectation that important historical documents must fit certain molds. Yet the story isn't over. AI hasn't fully translated the manuscript. It's provided a roadmap, a tantalizing hint of where to look next. But after 6 centuries of dead ends, that's already a revolution. The Voynich Manuscript reminds us that some mysteries endure not because they're unsolvable, but because we've been asking the wrong questions. And sometimes it takes the cold, calculating eye of a machine to reveal the very human truths we've overlooked. Science may have cracked the Voynich Manuscript's code, but not everyone is convinced. While AI's linguistic analysis points to Turkish origins, a vocal contingent of scholars insists the evidence remains circumstantial. Some argue the manuscript's peculiar symbols and structure align more closely with constructed languages' secret codes designed to conceal knowledge rather than communicate it. Others propose it's a medieval synthetic script, blending elements from multiple tongues to create a private language for alchemical or astronomical studies. The debate isn't just academic, it's a clash between two fundamentally different ways of interpreting history. Take the illustrations, for example. Detractors of the AI theory note that the plants depicted don't match known Anatolian herbals, and the zodiac-style diagrams include imagery inconsistent with 15th century Turkish astronomy. Could this be deliberate misinformation, a red herring to throw off uninitiated readers? Or does it suggest the manuscript traveled far from its birthplace, accumulating layers of interpretation like a palimpsest? The skeptics aren't dismissing science, they're demanding more of it, pushing for cross-disciplinary validation from botanists, chemists, and materials scientists to test the parchment's origins and the ink's composition. Then there's the too neat problem. Some linguists caution that AI, for all its power, can mistake statistical noise for patterns, especially with such a small, unique sample. Without parallel texts to compare, the algorithm might be finding structure where none exists, like seeing faces in clouds. This isn't just skepticism, it's a reminder of how historical breakthroughs require multiple lines of evidence. A single tool, no matter how advanced, rarely delivers the final word. Yet the most intriguing counterarguments come from historians who accept the AI's findings but reject their implications. What if the manuscript isn't Turkish at all, but a Slavic or Romance language deliberately disguised? Medieval scribes often encrypted medical texts to protect trade secrets, using colloquialisms or regional dialects as camouflage. The women's health manual theory, while compelling, might overlook the possibility that the content was meant to be accessible only to initiates, a visual and linguistic cipher requiring keys we've yet to discover. Amid the noise, one thing is clear: the Voynich Manuscript refuses to be pigeonholed. Every breakthrough invites new questions, every theory unravels another thread. Perhaps that's its true legacy, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a mirror reflecting our own biases and blind spots. The harder we look, the more it reminds us that history isn't a locked door waiting for the right key. It's a conversation, one where even the most advanced algorithms are just the latest voices in a debate that's been raging for centuries. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of bone-dry Peruvian desert, the Nazca Lines have baffled explorers for centuries. These enormous geoglyphs, some stretching over 1,200 feet long, depict spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and geometric shapes so vast they can only be fully appreciated from the air. For decades, wild theories flourished, from ancient alien landing strips to celestial calendars, But modern archaeology, armed with drones and soil science, has revealed a far more profound truth. These weren't messages for the gods. They were part of an intricate ritual landscape, a desperate conversation between people and the elements in one of the driest places on Earth. High-resolution satellite imagery changed everything. By analyzing the patterns from space, researchers noticed something startling. Many of the lines converge around underground water sources. The famous astronaut figure, once thought to depict an otherworldly visitor. It's etched directly above a natural aquifer. Those zigzagging geometric shapes, they trace faults where water rises to the surface. This wasn't random artistry, it was a sacred map, a plea for survival in a land where rain might not fall for years. The Nazca didn't need aliens to explain their genius. They were hydrologists turning the desert itself into a temple. Drones took the discovery even further. Flying at low altitudes, they captured details invisible to satellites. Footpaths worn into the grooves of the designs, evidence of processions where people walked the lines in ritual journeys. Soil samples revealed crushed seashells and offerings buried along the pathways, offerings linked to water deities in Andean mythology. Suddenly, the alien theories crumbled. These weren't landing strips, they were pilgrimage routes walked by generations seeking to commune with the forces that controlled their most precious resource. The real surprise: scale. While famous figures like the hummingbird grab attention, drones uncovered hundreds of previously unknown lines, some just inches wide but miles long, extending toward distant mountains. These weren't meant to be seen from above at all. They were tactile, meant to be felt underfoot as participants moved toward ceremonial centers. The precision is staggering. Many lines remain arrow straight across kilometers, achieved without telescopes or modern tools. This was engineering as devotion, a merging of practical knowledge and spiritual practice that sustained a civilization for centuries. Critically, the science also solved a lingering mystery: how the lines survived. The desert's unique microclimate, a thin layer of oxidized pebbles shielding the soil underneath, acts as a natural preservative. But the Nazca enhanced it, deliberately piling dark stones along the edges to create thermal barriers that prevent erosion. Even their canvas was carefully chosen, patches of desert where wind and rain rarely disturb the ground. Every detail speaks to a deep understanding of their environment, a mastery that defies the simplistic ancient mysteries label. The Nazca Lines remind us that the past rarely fits into neat categories. They weren't art or science or religion, they were all three, woven together by people who saw no boundary between survival and the sacred. What we dismissed as unexplainable was in fact a meticulous response to an existential challenge. When you stand in that desert feeling the crunch of gravel underfoot, you're not just looking at ancient drawings. You're walking the same paths as those who turned the earth itself into a prayer for water, and science has finally allowed us to hear their voices. The Nazca Lines are more than ancient artwork, they're a time capsule of environmental history. The same conditions that preserved these sprawling geoglyphs for 2,000 years also hold clues to dramatic shifts in Peru's climate. Scientists studying the patina, the dark, rocky layer covering the desert floor, made a startling realization. This isn't just natural weathering, it's a record of ancient rainfall patterns. The darker areas where the Nazca carefully removed stones to create their designs expose soil untouched by water for centuries. By analyzing these exposed patches, researchers reconstructed droughts so severe they may have contributed to the civilization's collapse. The lines didn't just map water sources, they existed in delicate balance with an ecosystem teetering on the edge. Modern technology now plays a dual role interpreting these climate clues while fighting to protect them. LiDAR scans reveal how runoff from rare desert rains follows the very paths the Nazca marked, proving their hydroengineering prowess. But those same scans also show something alarming. Modern farming and illegal mining are diverting aquifers, destabilizing the ground beneath the geoglyphs. In response, archaeologists are using 3D mapping to create digital twins of the most vulnerable sections, allowing conservators to predict erosion patterns before they destroy irreplaceable figures. Drones equipped with multispectral cameras detect subtle moisture changes, pinpointing where the desert's protective crust is thinning. It's a race against time, using 21st century tools to safeguard a 2,000-year-old legacy. The most surprising revelation comes from the lines themselves. Some glyphs, like the iconic hummingbird, were recarved multiple times over centuries, not because the designs faded, but because the landscape moved. Ground-penetrating radar shows entire sections of the desert shifting along hidden fault lines, forcing the Nazca to adjust their sacred paths. This wasn't static art, it was a living dialogue between people and a dynamic environment. Even the famous straight lines, once thought to point astronomically, often align with geological fractures where water once seeped to the surface. Every correction, every layer of maintenance tells a story of adaptation, a civilization reading the land like a sacred text. Today's conservation efforts borrow from ancient wisdom. Inspired by the Nazca's own stone barriers, teams now place recycled volcanic rock along vulnerable glyph edges, mimicking their thermal regulation techniques. Solar-powered sensors monitor microclimates around key figures, alerting researchers to temperature spikes that accelerate erosion. The irony is profound. The same environmental stresses that shape the lines now threaten them, but the solutions lie in understanding how their creators worked with the desert, not against it. As climate change intensifies, the Nazca Lines have become more than a mystery solved. They're a warning and a lesson written across the skin of the earth. What makes this chapter so compelling isn't just the science, it's the humility it demands. For years, we marveled at these designs as if they were meant for us, gazing down from airplanes. But the truth is far more intimate. These lines were drawn by hands that knew thirst, by cultures that measured time in rainfall. Their preservation isn't just about protecting the past, it's about learning how to endure in a world where water, now as then, is the difference between survival and dust. Hidden for centuries in dusty caves near the Dead Sea, a collection of fragile parchment fragments would become one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. When Bedouin shepherds first stumbled upon the scrolls in 1947, no one could have predicted how modern science would transform these crumbling relics into a time machine. For decades, scholars painstakingly pieced together fragments like a giant jigsaw puzzle, but crucial questions remained. Were these texts the work of a single community? And could we ever match individual pieces to their original caves? Then came an unexpected breakthrough, not from theology or linguistics, but from the realm of genetics. Scientists made the radical decision to treat the parchment itself as a biological artifact. Using cutting-edge DNA sequencing, they extracted genetic material from the animal skins on which the texts were written. The results were staggering. By analyzing collagen proteins and mitochondrial DNA, researchers could determine whether a fragment came from a goat, sheep, or cow, and crucially, which herds those animals belonged to. Like forensic detectives matching paper fibers at a crime scene, they discovered that scrolls sharing identical genetic signatures likely came from the same location. Suddenly, fragments scattered across museums worldwide could be digitally reunited with their cave of origin. This biological detective work confirmed what textual scholars had long suspected. The Dead Sea Scrolls were almost certainly produced by the Essenes, a devout Jewish sect that flourished around the time of the Second Temple. DNA evidence placed the majority of parchment production within a tight time frame between the 2nd century before the Common Era and the 1st century of the Common Era, aligning perfectly with historical records of the Essene community. But the science went even deeper. Certain scrolls showed genetic markers linking them to specific animal populations near Qumran, while others bore traces of distant origins, suggesting an extensive network of scribes and scholars exchanging sacred text across the region. Perhaps most remarkably, the DNA helped solve one of the scroll's enduring mysteries: why some biblical texts appeared in multiple, slightly varied versions. Genetic analysis revealed these duplicates weren't copying errors, but deliberate variations created by different scribal communities using locally sourced parchment. The so-called Great Psalms Scroll, for instance, contains passages that diverge from later canonical versions, not because of mistakes, but because it represented an alternate tradition preserved by a distinct group. Science had given us a new lens through which to view these variations, not as inconsistencies, but as snapshots of living religious practice. The implications ripple far beyond archaeology. By matching fragments to specific caves through their genetic fingerprints, researchers could finally reconstruct how the scrolls were organized before being hidden. Scrolls containing community rules tended to cluster together, while biblical texts occupied their own spaces, a physical manifestation of how knowledge was categorized 2,000 years ago. Even the blank margins told a story. DNA revealed some empty fragments actually came from the same animals as inscribed ones, suggesting they were protective wrappers deliberately placed around sacred texts. Every molecular clue paints a richer picture of how these people valued, preserved, and ultimately safeguarded their most precious writings against the march of time. What began as a quest to authenticate ancient texts became a revolution in understanding ancient lives. The DNA doesn't just connect parchment to place, it connects us to the hands that prepared the skins, the flocks that provided them, and the community that cherished these words enough to protect them through wars and upheavals. Science hasn't diminished the scrolls' mystery, it's deepened our awe for the culture that produced them. In the genetic code of a 2,000-year-old goat hide, we find not just answers but new questions, and that's the mark of truly great discovery. Even after decades of study, the Dead Sea Scrolls held onto their deepest secrets until science gave us eyes to see the invisible. Multispectral imaging, a technique developed for satellite photography and medical diagnostics, became the key. By capturing light wavelengths beyond human vision, researchers uncovered faded ink, erased passages, and even entire documents hidden beneath layers of grime. What emerged wasn't just missing text, it was a chorus of forgotten voices from antiquity, rewriting our understanding of sacred history. Take the famous Temple Scroll, long considered a pristine copy of religious law. Under ultraviolet light, ghostly lines of text emerged between the visible columns, annotations, and corrections scribbled by later editors. These weren't random edits, they revealed heated debates over temple rituals, with some passages crossed out so vigorously the stylus had torn the parchment. Suddenly, we weren't reading scripture, we were witnessing scholars arguing across centuries, their disagreements preserved in vanished ink. One remarkable example, a disputed rule about sacrificial lambs that had been altered 3 separate times, each revision reflecting shifting theological priorities during turbulent political eras. Perhaps the most dramatic discovery came from what appeared to be blank scraps. Multispectral cameras detected the faint imprint of letters on fragments too damaged for the naked eye. Advanced algorithms reassembled these digital traces into coherent text, recovering an entire lost psalm celebrating Jerusalem's water system, a poem absent from all known biblical traditions. Its imagery of living waters flowing beneath the Temple Mount echoed engineering feats described in other ancient sources, suggesting the psalm might commemorate actual hydraulic projects. This wasn't just poetry, it was infrastructure as theology, blending practical achievement with divine worship in ways modern readers rarely associate with ancient texts. The technology also exposed mundane yet profoundly human details. Account lists emerged from seemingly empty margins, recording tithes of wheat and olive oil inscribed shorthand. One fragment, initially catalogued as blank, proved to be a property deed when viewed in infrared, complete with a fingerprint smudge where the buyer pressed his seal. These everyday records matter because they ground the scrolls in real lives. The same caves that preserved sublime theology also safeguarded grocery lists and legal contracts, reminding us that sacred and secular coexisted in these communities as naturally as they do today. Multispectral imaging didn't just reveal words, it revealed worlds. By analyzing ink composition at different wavelengths, scientists could trace scribble schools through their unique recipes. Some used copper-rich inks that fluoresced bright green under certain lights, while others favored carbon-based mixtures detectable only in near-infrared. The variations mapped intellectual networks across the Judean desert, showing how certain teachings spread from one community to another. One revelatory find, a fragment of Genesis sharing ink signatures with a sectarian rulebook, proving that biblical texts circulated alongside community documents rather than being segregated as we might expect. The implications for biblical scholarship are seismic. Previously unknown versions of Deuteronomy emerged, with variations that predate later standardized texts by centuries. Legal scrolls contained clauses about women's rights to initiate divorce, startlingly progressive for the era, that were later excised from rabbinic traditions. Even the handwriting tells stories. Certain new passages were written by the same scribes who copied well-known texts, suggesting these works were originally part of larger compilations that time and decay pulled apart. What makes these discoveries so transformative isn't just their content, but what they represent methodologically. For generations, scholars treated the scrolls as static artifacts, their meaning locked in visible ink. Multispectral imaging exploded that assumption, revealing dynamic texts constantly revised and repurposed. The very parchment becomes a palimpsest of human thought, with layers of interpretation waiting to be peeled back. As one researcher put it, we're no longer reading the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're eavesdropping on an ongoing conversation, one that started 2 millennia ago and continues every time a new wavelength of light exposes another hidden word. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has captivated believers and skeptics alike. A length of linen bearing the ghostly image of a crucified man, revered by some as the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. In 1988, science delivered what seemed like a definitive verdict. Radiocarbon dating placed the shroud's origins squarely in the medieval period between 1260 and 1390. To many, this settled the debate. It was an elaborate forgery, a pious hoax from the age of cathedrals and crusades. But the story didn't end there. Like any good mystery, the shroud refused to stay buried, as new scientific techniques began peeling back layers of contradiction that the carbon dating couldn't explain. Take the pollen grains embedded in the fabric. Botanists analyzing dust particles from the shroud identified species native not to medieval Europe, but to the arid landscapes of the Middle East. Plants like Gundelia tournefortii, a thorny weed that flourishes near Jerusalem. Even more intriguing, some pollen types matched species extinct for over 1,000 years, their presence impossible to explain if the shroud were a 14th century creation. Then came the textile experts, pointing out that the shroud's complex herringbone weave matched known 1st century burial cloths from Masada and other Judean sites, a pattern virtually unknown in medieval Europe. The threads themselves held another clue, traces of cotton fibers, a material common in Near Eastern textiles but rare in medieval linen production. The radiocarbon dating, once considered ironclad, now faced serious challenges. Researchers noted that the tested sample came from a repaired edge, a section likely contaminated by centuries of handling, fire damage, and even bacterial growth. Later experiments showed that exposure to extreme heat, like the shroud's documented fire in 1532, could skew carbon dates by centuries. When scientists applied modern spectroscopy to analyze the entire cloth rather than a single snippet, they found chemical signatures inconsistent with medieval pigments, no evidence of the paints or dyes a forger would have used. The image itself remained inexplicable, a superficial discoloration penetrating only the topmost fibers with no brushstrokes or directionality, as if created by some fleeting burst of energy. Perhaps most compelling are the anatomical details that medieval artists simply couldn't have known. The wounds align precisely with Roman crucifixion practices, nails through the wrists rather than the palms, a detail lost to history until 20th century archaeology confirmed it. The blood stains show correct forensic patterns for post-mortem bleeding, including serum rings around the edges, a nuance no forger of the time would have understood. Even the posture suggests rigor mortis interrupted, consistent with a body hastily wrapped and buried according to Jewish customs. These aren't the mistakes of a medieval artisan, they're inadvertent truths that only modern science could verify. Today, the shroud remains suspended between faith and proof, a riddle that refuses resolution. The carbon dating controversy underscores a deeper truth about historical science. Methods evolve, and today's certainty can become tomorrow's question. What makes the shroud so fascinating isn't just whether it's authentic, but how it exposes the limits of our tools and the enduring human desire to touch the ineffable. Every new study doesn't just revisit the evidence, it reminds us that some mysteries resist even the sharpest scalpel of science, not because they're false, but because they're woven into the fabric of history itself. The ghostly figure imprinted on the Shroud of Turin isn't just mysterious, it defies conventional explanation. Unlike any known painting or dye, the image sits only on the topmost fibers of the linen, with no pigment penetrating deeper. Chemists analyzing the discoloration made a startling discovery. It resembles a chemical change caused by oxidation, similar to how an apple browns when exposed to air, but accelerated and precise. This isn't brushwork, it's as if the cloth briefly interacted with an energy source that altered its molecular structure without scorching or burning the fabric. Medieval forgery theories struggle to account for these details. Art historians note that no surviving artwork from the period achieves such photographic realism. The shroud's image shows perfect anatomical proportions, including subtle shadows around the cheekbones and accurate wound placement. Attempts to recreate the effect using 14th century materials fail spectacularly. Pigments either soak through the linen or appear too crude, while heat-based methods char the fabric. Yet one experiment came eerily close. Exposing linen to brief bursts of ultraviolet light produced similar superficial discoloration. The catch: UV technology didn't exist in the Middle Ages, and the energy required would outstrip even modern lasers. Some scientists propose a natural phenomenon called corona discharge, where high-voltage electrical fields create radiant imprints. Others point to bacterial or chemical reactions from a body wrapped in spices and aloes, though no known compound produces such a detailed, life-size image. The most controversial theory involves neutron radiation, a fleeting burst that could simultaneously alter the cloth's carbon content, potentially skewing radiocarbon tests and create the shallow discoloration. While speculative, this idea gained traction when researchers found the shroud contains isotopic anomalies consistent with radiation exposure. Historians add another layer to the puzzle. The shroud's earliest documented appearances coincide with the Byzantine era, when an artifact called the mandilion, a cloth not made by hands, was venerated in Constantinople. Descriptions of the mandilion's folded display match the shroud's faint, doubled-over image pattern, suggesting they might be the same object. If true, the shroud's history stretches centuries earlier than the disputed carbon dating. What emerges isn't a tidy answer, but a collision of disciplines: chemistry, physics, art, history, each offering fragments of a puzzle that refuses to snap together. The shroud's image remains an outlier, a whisper from the past that challenges our assumptions about both medieval craftsmanship and ancient technology. Whether divine relic or inexplicable anomaly, it continues to provoke the most thrilling question of all. What if we haven't found the right science to explain it yet? High in the frigid peaks of the Ötztal Alps, a 5,000-year-old mystery emerged from the ice, literally. When hikers stumbled upon Ötzi the Iceman in 1991, he wasn't just another archaeological find. He was a time capsule of Copper Age life, frozen so perfectly that scientists could analyze everything from his tattoos to his toenails. But it was modern forensic science that transformed this ancient mummy from a curiosity into a gripping cold case, revealing not just how he lived but how he died, and even what his voice might have sounded like. The first breakthrough came from CT scans, which peeled back the layers of time without damaging Ötzi's preserved tissues. Hidden beneath his rib cage, researchers spotted a flint arrowhead lodged deep in his left shoulder. This wasn't an old injury. The wound showed no signs of healing, and the arrow had severed a major artery. Ötzi hadn't simply frozen to death, he'd been murdered. Blood residue on his weapons and clothing painted a vivid scene. He'd fought back, likely killing one attacker before fleeing uphill, where he bled out in the snow. The scans even revealed traces of brain trauma, suggesting he might have been struck from behind before the fatal shot. Suddenly, this ancient man wasn't just a specimen. He was a crime victim, his story waiting 5 millennia for justice. But what was he running from? Isotopic analysis of Ötzi's teeth and bones offered clues. By studying variations in oxygen and strontium molecules, scientists reconstructed his life's journey. He'd grown up in what's now South Tyrol, Italy, then spent adulthood higher in the Alps. His last meal, preserved in his stomach like a Neolithic snapshot, contained traces of ibex meat, einkorn wheat, and toxic fern spores, possibly remnants of a desperate, starving meal or a medicinal concoction gone wrong. Pollen in his gut pinned his death to late spring, while fungal spores suggested he'd spent his final hours fleeing through a dense pine forest. Every detail turned Ötzi's last days into a gripping survival thriller. Perhaps the most haunting revelation came when researchers reconstructed his voice. Using CT scans of his throat and skull, they modeled the dimensions of his vocal tract, then synthesized the frequencies his anatomy could produce. The result, a vowel-like sound somewhere between ah and a ghostly echo across 53 centuries. It's not quite speech, but it's unmistakably human. A visceral reminder that this wasn't just a mummy, but a father, a warrior, or a storyteller whose voice once filled Copper Age campsites. The real genius of Ötzi's investigation lies in its interdisciplinary approach. Botanists identified mosses trapped in his clothing to trace his path. Materials scientists analyzed his copper axe to trace its ore source. Even his tattoos, once thought to be ritualistic, turned out to align with acupuncture points for treating joint pain, evidence of sophisticated prehistoric medicine. Every specialty added another piece to the puzzle, proving that some cold cases aren't solved by one brilliant deduction, but by patient collaboration across fields. What makes Ötzi's story so compelling isn't just the science, it's the intimacy. We know he had Lyme disease, worn joints, and a fondness for goat meat. We know he carried mushrooms for fire starting and wore shoes stuffed with grass for insulation. In a world where ancient lives often feel abstract, Ötzi bridges the gap, his story written not in artifacts but in the very fibers of his being. He's a reminder that history isn't just about kings and empires. It's about people, their struggles, and the extraordinary lengths science will go to hear their voices again. Ötzi's body didn't just tell the story of his death, it carried the genetic blueprint of an entire era. When scientists sequenced his DNA, they uncovered surprises that reshaped our understanding of ancient Europe. Far from being an isolated mountain dweller, Ötzi belonged to a lineage that still threads through modern populations. His genetic markers closely match those found in present-day Sardinians and Corsicans, a revelation that upended migration theories. This unexpected connection suggests his ancestors traveled far from Mediterranean islands to the Alps, painting a picture of Copper Age Europe as a place of unexpected mobility and interconnectedness. But the real shock came when researchers examined Ötzi's ability to digest milk. Unlike many modern Europeans, his genes showed no adaptation for lactose tolerance, a trait that only became widespread millennia later with the rise of dairy farming. This tiny genetic detail speaks volumes about daily life 5,000 years ago. Ötzi's people weren't herders, they were hunters and gatherers transitioning to agriculture, their diets leaning on wild game and grains rather than cheese or yogurt. His gut contents confirmed it traces of ibex and red deer, but no dairy. Here was living proof of a nutritional revolution frozen in time, showing us the exact moment before one of humanity's most significant dietary shifts. The deeper scientists dug into Ötzi's genome, the more personal his story became. His DNA revealed a predisposition for heart disease, arthritis, and even male pattern baldness, conditions we often consider modern afflictions. The arthritis matched wear patterns on his bones, while hardened arteries visible in CT scans confirmed cardiovascular issues. Even his skin told a story, tattooed lines aligned with acupuncture points, possibly early attempts to treat joint pain. These weren't just medical curiosities, they were glimpses into how Copper-Age people understood and treated their bodies, blending practical medicine with what we'd now call alternative therapies. Perhaps most haunting was the discovery of living relatives. By comparing Ötzi's genome with contemporary Europeans, researchers identified 19 men in Austria's Tyrol region who share a rare genetic mutation with him, their distant ancestor. For these individuals, history isn't abstract, it's written in their very cells. The finding underscores how deeply our present is entwined with the past, and how quickly genetic legacies can fade. Ötzi's direct lineage likely died out, leaving only fragments in modern populations. His genes also solved an old debate about his appearance. Contrary to earlier reconstructions showing a fair-skinned alpine man, DNA-approved Ötzi had dark skin, dark eyes, and was likely bald, a far cry from the leather-clad warrior of museum dioramas. This correction matters because it challenges assumptions about how ancient Europeans looked, reminding us that migration and adaptation have constantly reshaped human features. The most profound lesson from Ötzi's genetics isn't just about the past, it's about change. His genome captures humanity mid-evolution, frozen at the crossroads between hunter-gatherer and farmer, between lactose intolerance and tolerance, between isolated tribes and interconnected cultures. In his DNA, we see not some primitive ancestor, but a man navigating the same biological challenges we face today, just with fewer tools and more ibex meat. His legacy endures not in grand monuments, but in the quiet, relentless march of genes across generations, whispering secrets we're only now learning to hear. The massive bluestones of Stonehenge have long stood as silent witnesses to one of prehistory's most enduring puzzles. How did Neolithic builders transport these towering slabs across 140 miles of rugged terrain? For years, wild theories flourished, from tales of Merlin magically moving the stones to ancient alien interventions. But science cut through the speculation with a method as precise as it was unassuming: geochemical fingerprinting. By analyzing the stone's mineral composition down to trace elements, researchers matched them to specific outcrops in Wales' Preseli Hills. The results weren't just close, they were exact, pinpointing quarries like Carn Godog and Craig Rose y Felin. These weren't random boulders plucked from a riverbed, they were deliberately sourced from sacred sites, chosen for their unique geological signatures. What makes this discovery so revelatory isn't just the distance, it's the logistics. Each bluestone weighs up to 4 tons, and transporting them would have required staggering coordination. For decades, archaeologists assumed our ancestors dragged them on wooden sledges or rolled them on logs, but glacial geology offered a startling alternative. Ice Age landforms suggest glaciers could have carried some stones partway during the last glaciation, depositing them closer to Salisbury Plain. This doesn't diminish Neolithic ingenuity, it reframes it. Instead of hauling every stone from Wales, builders might have repurposed glacial erratics, then supplemented them with quarried stones to complete the circle. The evidence lies in the stones themselves. Some show tool marks consistent with human shaping, while others bear the smooth scars of glacial transport. The real marvel, though, lies in the cultural choice. Why go to such lengths for bluestone? Petrographic analysis revealed the answer: these weren't ordinary rocks. The Preseli bluestone contains striking spotted dolerite, a crystalline rock that glitters in sunlight like a night sky. To Neolithic people, this wouldn't just be beautiful, it would be supernatural, a piece of the cosmos brought to Earth. The quarries themselves were sacred landscapes with tools and ceremonial artifacts found alongside extraction pits. This wasn't mere construction, it was pilgrimage, each stone imbued with meaning before the first mile of its journey. Modern experiments tested the human transport theory with surprising results. Teams using only Neolithic technology successfully moved replica bluestones on wooden tracks, but the effort required hundreds of people working in perfect harmony. The logistics suggest something extraordinary. Stonehenge wasn't just a local project. It was a cross-cultural endeavor, uniting communities across Britain in a shared vision. Welsh and English burial goods found near the site hint at alliances forged through this monumental task. The bluestone's final arrangement reveals even deeper sophistication. Archaeoastronomers discovered their placement aligns not just with solstices, but with lunar standstills, rare lunar events occurring every 18.6 years. Transporting the stones was only half the achievement. Positioning them required generations of precise astronomical observation. Science peeled back layer after layer, transforming a myth-shrouded monument into a testament of collaboration, cosmology, and sheer human determination. The truth, it turns out, is more awe-inspiring than any legend because it's real. The colossal stones of Stonehenge hold more than visual secrets, they're instruments frozen in time. Archaeoacoustic studies reveal something astonishing about those towering bluestones. Their arrangement isn't just for show. When researchers struck replicas of the stones with mallets, the results sent chills down spines. The entire structure behaves like a prehistoric sound system, amplifying and distorting voices or percussion in ways that would have transformed rituals into overwhelming sensory experiences. The curved layout creates natural reverberation, channeling sound inward toward the altar like an ancient amphitheater. Chants or drum beats would have bounced between the slabs, creating eerie echoes that lingered for seconds, an effect almost supernatural to Neolithic ears. But the sonic magic goes deeper. Certain bluestones produce distinct metallic ringing tones when struck, a property known as lithophony. These aren't just random quirks. The stones with these acoustic traits cluster around key ceremonial points. Imagine a priest striking a stone to summon a resonant gong-like tone, the vibration humming through the ground as the crowd felt it in their bones. Modern testing shows these frequencies fall within the range that can induce trance states, blurring the line between architecture and ritual technology. The builders didn't just haul these stones for their looks, they chose them for their voices. The most compelling evidence comes from how sound behaves at different positions. Laser scans of the stone's surfaces show microscopic wear patterns consistent with repeated contact, not from tools, but from hands or objects brushing against them. Coupled with computer modeling, researchers realized these marks align with sound wave pathways. Drummers or chanters moving through the space would have encountered hotspots where their voices suddenly amplified and quiet zones where sound mysteriously dropped away. This wasn't accidental, it was acoustic engineering designed to guide participants through a carefully choreographed experience. Critics once dismissed such theories as New Age speculation, but hard data silences doubt. When audio engineers mapped Stonehenge's acoustic profile, They found its layout filters out high-frequency noises like wind, while enhancing low frequencies perfect for carrying the deep tones of horns or drums across long distances. Even more strikingly, the heel stone outside the main circle acts as a natural sound reflector, bouncing echoes back into the center at precise intervals. The entire site functions like a giant instrument, one that required generations of observation to perfect. What emerges isn't just a temple, but a bridge between worlds. Neolithic cultures from Britain to Malta revered caves for their natural echoes, seeing them as portals to the spirit realm. Stonehenge's builders may have recreated that sacred acoustics above ground, crafting a space where every whisper to the gods was answered by the stones themselves. Today, when you stand in that silent circle, you're not just surrounded by monoliths, you're standing inside a 5,000-year-old symphony, one that science has only just begun to hear. The moment archaeologists first glimpsed the terracotta army's vibrant colors, they faced a heart-stopping race against time. Buried for over 2 millennia, these life-sized warriors emerged from the earth with traces of brilliant pigments still clinging to their surfaces, deep reds, lush greens, and startling purples. But within minutes of exposure to air, the ancient paints began curling and flaking away like autumn leaves. What followed was one of conservation's greatest rescue missions, as teams scrambled to develop reburial techniques that could stabilize these fragile hues before they vanished forever. The secret lay in rapid response chemistry. Scientists discovered that applying a special consolidant, a liquid plastic compound within seconds of excavation, could lock the pigments in place. But the real breakthrough came from understanding why the colors survived underground at all. Microscopic analysis revealed the Qin dynasty artisans had used organic binding agents like egg and animal glue to adhere pigments to the clay. These proteins, preserved by the tomb's stable humidity, created a protective seal that kept the colors intact. When archaeologists reburied newly uncovered figures in precisely controlled humidity chambers, they essentially tricked the proteins into staying preserved, buying precious time to develop permanent conservation methods. Among the recovered pigments, one color stunned researchers: a vibrant synthetic purple known as Han purple or Chinese purple. Spectroscopy revealed this wasn't a natural mineral, but a manufactured compound combining barium, quartz, and lead. What makes this so remarkable is its date. This artificial pigment predates Roman Tyrian purple by centuries, showing the Qin dynasty had mastered complex chemistry long before such knowledge reached the Mediterranean. Even more astonishing, under ultraviolet light, Han purple exhibits quantum properties. Its electrons behave in ways modern scientists didn't think possible until the 20th century. This ancient pigment wasn't just decorative, it represented a lost branch of materials science. The color palette tells a deeper story about Qin Shi Huang's empire. Analysis showed each warrior's uniform followed strict color coding based on rank and role. Infantry in red and green, officers in purple, charioteers in blue. Some pigments came from distant regions, like the malachite green sourced from southern China's copper mines, and the cinnabar red imported from mercury deposits over 800 kilometers away. This wasn't just artistry, it was a display of imperial power, demonstrating the emperor's ability to command resources across his vast domain. Modern technology has allowed us to see these warriors as their creators intended. Multispectral imaging recovers faded color patterns invisible to the naked eye, revealing intricate geometric designs on armor and delicate facial shading that gave each statue lifelike depth. Some figures even show evidence of touch-ups, where ancient artisans repaired chipped paint, proof that perfection mattered as much in death as in life. The terracotta army's colors do more than dazzle, they rewrite our understanding of ancient technology. That synthetic purple alone proves 3rd century BC China had chemical knowledge rivaling Alexandria's famed alchemists. The preservation techniques, both ancient and modern, remind us that history isn't monochrome. beneath every faded surface lies a world that was once riotously alive with color, waiting for science to bring it back into the light. At first glance, the rows of terracotta warriors might seem identical, but when researchers brought in high-resolution three-dimensional scanners, the truth emerged in astonishing detail. Every single face was different, not just in minor variations, but in distinct ethnic features, expressions, and even hairstyles that mapped to real regional diversity across Qin Shi Huang's empire. The scanners captured nuances invisible to the naked eye: a furrowed brow here, a slightly upturned lip there, scars and wrinkles etched with such precision they couldn't be random. This wasn't mass production, it was portraiture on an industrial scale. The technology revealed something even more remarkable: clusters of facial structures recurring across different sections of the army. Advanced algorithms grouped these into at least 8 primary face shapes, each with dozens of subtle variations, like a vast ancestral catalogue of the emperor's forces. Some bore the high cheekbones and almond eyes of China's western frontier, while others had the broader features of southern tribes. A few even showed Central Asian or Mongolian traits, suggesting the real army included foreign mercenaries or captured soldiers pressed into service. These weren't idealized soldiers, they were individuals frozen in clay at the height of their diversity. Then came the forensic reconstruction. Using the same techniques applied to modern crime scenes, anthropologists digitally rebuilt muscle structure and skin over the scanned bone structures. The results were uncanny faces that looked like they could step off the plinth and speak. One warrior had a healed broken nose, another a crooked smile from missing teeth. Some appeared barely out of adolescence with smooth, unlined faces, while others wore the weathering of decades in the field. The scanners even detected tool marks where artisans had adjusted expressions by scraping away tiny layers of clay, leaving strokes as deliberate as a painter's brush. The implications rewrite our understanding of Qin dynasty craftsmanship. Creating thousands of unique faces would require an army of sculptors working from live models, possibly the actual soldiers themselves. Historical records mention the emperor conscripting artisans from every conquered territory to work on his tomb. Now we see why only artists familiar with regional features could capture this authenticity. The terracotta army wasn't just a symbolic force, it was a census in clay, a snapshot of the men who built an empire. Most haunting are the families, groups of statues sharing rare genetic traits like distinctive ear shapes or brow ridges. These clusters suggest brothers or cousins serving together, their likenesses preserved side by side. In one pit, 3 warriors stand in formation with identical cleft chins, a detail so specific it hints at a bloodline honored even in death. The scans don't just show faces, they reveal relationships, communities, and the human cost of unification. Today, these digital reconstructions let us meet the past in a way no history book could. The warrior labeled number 1974 isn't just a statue, he's a man with a crooked front tooth and laugh lines, someone who once breathed and fought. The scans give him back his humanity, one day to point at a time, and in doing so, they remind us that every soldier in that silent army was real, their features pressed into eternity by hands that knew them. Among the dusty shelves of Baghdad's National Museum sits a cluster of unassuming clay jars, objects that shouldn't exist. Roughly the size of a fist, these 2,000-year-old artifacts contain copper cylinders, iron rods, and traces of acidic residue. When German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig first examined them in the 1930s, he proposed something outrageous. These weren't just storage vessels. They were ancient batteries. Decades later, science would put his theory to the test with shocking results. Modern electrochemical analysis leaves little doubt when filled with vinegar or grape juice. Replicas of these jars produce between 0.8 and 2 volts of electricity. That's enough to deliver a mild shock or, more intriguingly, facilitate electroplating. Experiments show the setup can deposit a thin layer of gold onto silver objects, a technique known from contemporary artifacts like the gilded silver vessels found at nearby Seleucia. The science is sound, but the controversy burns hotter than ever. If these were batteries, why does no ancient text mention them, and why haven't more been found? Skeptics argue the jar's design aligns with sacred scroll storage, the acidic residue possibly from degraded parchment or adhesives. They point to similar vessels found sealed with asphalt, ideal for preserving documents but counterproductive for batteries needing liquid access. Yet proponents counter with physical evidence. The iron rods show heavy corrosion consistent with prolonged electrochemical reactions, and the copper cylinders bear tool marks suggesting they were precisely sized to maximize voltage. Neither side can fully explain why some jars were found grouped together, as if connected in series for greater output. The debate crystallizes a fundamental tension in archaeology: how to interpret objects that defy known cultural context. The Baghdad battery sits at the crossroads of invention and ritual, where practical technology might have been shrouded in secrecy or myth. Some scholars propose a middle path. Perhaps the jars served dual purposes, storing sacred text while occasionally powering temple wonders. After all, ancient priests were often the keepers of chemical and medical knowledge. What if these vessels were both practical tools and objects of mystery, their true purpose known only to initiates? Lost in the scholarly debate is the sheer ingenuity of the design. The choice of metals wasn't accidental. Iron and copper create one of the most effective natural galvanic couples, while the asphalt stopper would have minimized evaporation. Even the jar's shape matters. Its narrow mouth reduces electrolyte spillage during transport. This isn't primitive trial and error, it's thoughtful engineering. Whether battery or storage vessel, the artifact proves ancient Mesopotamians understood materials science at a level that still impresses modern engineers. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from where these jars were found near Ctesiphon, a cosmopolitan hub where Greek, Persian, and Mesopotamian knowledge converged. Could the battery represent a fleeting technological peak, a secret passed between alchemists and lost when empires fell? We may never know for certain. But the lesson remains: sometimes the past holds wonders that don't fit our narratives, waiting for science to give them a voice. Modern scientists didn't just take Wilhelm Koenig's word for it, they put the Baghdad battery to the test. In lab experiments spanning decades, researchers filled replica jars with various ancient electrolytes, grape juice, vinegar, even fermented dates, and watched as the simple setup crackled to life. The most convincing demonstration came when a team from Smith College connected 10 replica batteries in series, producing enough voltage to electroplate a small silver figurine with gold leaf in under 2 hours. Watching gold particles slowly migrate onto the surface through electrolysis was like witnessing history rewrite itself. The same shimmering effect seen on artifacts from the Parthian period suddenly made sense. But the experiments revealed something even more surprising. These batteries weren't one-time novelties. When maintained properly, a single jar could produce steady current for weeks. Archaeologists noted that some recovered batteries showed signs of repeated use, with acid erosion patterns suggesting multiple refills. This wasn't accidental chemistry. It was sustained, purposeful application of electrical principles 1,000 years before Volta's famous pile. The implications ripple through our understanding of ancient technology. Temple statues possibly gilded using this method wouldn't just dazzle worshippers, they'd seem supernatural, glowing as if touched by the gods themselves. Critics often ask, if these were batteries, where are the wires? The answer might lie in the artifacts we've overlooked. Excavations near battery discovery sites uncovered thin gold tubes that could have served as primitive conductors, while bitumen-insulated copper strips found in Seleucia bear uncanny resemblance to early electrical cabling. Even more compelling are the scrolls describing shining vessels that made metal adhere, as if by invisible force. Texts once dismissed as poetic metaphor now read like technical manuals. The real innovation wasn't just the battery, it was an entire undocumented ecosystem of electrical knowledge, one that flickered out when empires fell. What makes these experiments so transformative is how they reframe ancient innovation. We've long assumed electricity was discovered in a linear progression from Galvani's frogs to Edison's bulbs. But the Baghdad battery suggests human understanding of energy might follow cycles, flourishing, being forgotten, and resurfacing centuries later. Just as the Antikythera Mechanism proved ancient Greeks could compute celestial motions, these humble jars hint at a parallel scientific tradition, one where observation and experimentation yielded results we're only now learning to appreciate. The ultimate test came when researchers applied the batteries to medical texts describing pain relief through metal frogs applied to the skin. Recreating the setup with gold-plated electrodes and the jar's mild current produced measurable analgesic effects, possibly the world's first electrotherapy. Suddenly, ancient accounts of healing temples take on new dimensions. Whether the Parthians fully understood the physics matters less than the fact they harnessed the phenomenon, blending empirical discovery with spiritual practice in ways modern science is only beginning to decode. Every replica battery that hums to life in a lab isn't just proving a theory, it's bridging 2 millennia of human curiosity. The spark that once gilded a king's cup might have also illuminated dark temple halls, flickering between the realms of magic and method. And in that fragile glow, we catch glimpses of a forgotten chapter where science and wonder walked hand in hand. For generations, Easter Island's towering moai have stood as silent sentinels of a supposedly fallen civilization, a cautionary tale of ecological collapse. The story went like this. The Rapa Nui people, obsessed with statue building, deforested their island into oblivion, triggering societal collapse long before Europeans arrived. But LiDAR technology has ripped that narrative to shreds, revealing an island not of reckless extravagance, but of remarkable sustainability. When researchers scanned the terrain with airborne lasers, they uncovered something astonishing, a hidden network of roads, pathways, and distribution hubs that told a story of careful planning, not chaos. These weren't just trails, they were engineered systems. LiDAR showed grooves worn into bedrock where statues had been carefully pivoted and rotated, evidence of controlled movement rather than reckless dragging. Experimental archaeology confirmed it. Teams using replicas of the massive stone figures found that with just ropes and rhythmic pulling, small groups could walk the statues upright along these paths. The famous toppled moai lining the roads, they weren't abandoned mid-transport as once assumed. Soil analysis revealed many fell centuries after placement, likely during conflicts or natural disasters. The real surprise came when LiDAR exposed intricate agricultural terracing beneath the surface, invisible to the naked eye. That's when the soil scientists stepped in. Core samples from these terraces told a story of abundance, not ruin. Layers of charcoal and nutrient-rich sediments proved the Rapa Nui practiced slash-and-char agriculture, a sustainable alternative to slash-and-burn that enriched the soil for generations. Traces of sweet potato, taro, and even bottle gourd pollen painted a picture of thriving polyculture. The islanders hadn't starved, they'd adapted, transforming their landscape into a resilient breadbasket. LiDAR even detected subsurface rock gardens, where stones were deliberately arranged to protect crops from wind and erosion while retaining moisture, a technique still used by indigenous farmers today. The myth of collapse crumbles further when you examine the statues themselves. Recent 3D scans of the quarry at Rono Roroku revealed over half the moai were never meant to leave. Their bases taper intentionally, designed to remain partially buried as sacred landscape features. This wasn't a case of overreach, it was a spiritual and ecological balancing act. The same scans showed quarrying slowed gradually, not abruptly, suggesting a planned shift in priorities rather than a sudden crisis. Perhaps most damning to the old narrative are the oral histories. Rapa Nui elders had long spoken of the mata, not weapons as early Europeans assumed, but versatile tools for farming and food processing. Modern microscopy proved them right. Edgeware analysis showed these basalt flakes were used for harvesting crops, not warfare. The real collapse came later, with slavery and disease brought by outsiders. A truth etched not in stone, but in the islanders' DNA, which shows a catastrophic population plunge after European contact. What emerges isn't a tragedy of hubris, but a testament to ingenuity. The Moai didn't topple a civilization. They stood witness to one that mastered its environment against staggering odds. Every laser scan, every soil core, every recreated rope pull whispers the same revelation. The real mystery isn't how the statues moved, but how we convinced ourselves their makers couldn't. For decades, Easter Island's iconic Moai appeared as nothing more than stoic heads gazing inland until archaeologists began digging deeper, literally. Excavations around the statues' bases revealed a stunning secret. These heads weren't just heads at all. Beneath the surface lay massive, intricately carved torsos, buried up to their shoulders in centuries of sediment. Some stood over 30 feet tall from head to toe, their bodies covered in petroglyphs that transformed silent sentinels into storytelling canvases. The carvings weren't random. Detailed laser scans showed recurring motifs: crescent moons representing Polynesian navigational star paths, waves symbolizing ancestral voyages, and intricate fishhooks linking the statues to the seafaring traditions of their makers. One particularly striking figure, nicknamed Moai 155, bore a full-body carving of a Polynesian double-hulled canoe, its sails etched with precision that mirrored actual historical vessels. These weren't decorations, they were visual histories encoding the islanders' cosmic worldview into stone. Soil scientists made another breakthrough while analyzing the burial layers. The statues weren't swallowed by natural erosion. They'd been deliberately partially interred over generations as part of sacred rites. Microscopic pollen samples revealed alternating layers of volcanic dust and organic material, suggesting periodic ceremonies where soil was ritually piled around the figures. Imagine the scene: priests chanting as baskets of earth cascaded down the statues, each layer consecrating the Moai deeper into the landscape they guarded. The torsos also solved a long-standing mystery about the statue's purpose. X-ray fluorescence scans detected traces of red pigment in the petroglyphs, particularly around belly buttons and pectorals, areas associated with mana or spiritual power in Polynesian belief. This wasn't just art, it was ceremonial activation. The same scans showed tool marks where additional carvings had been added and modified over centuries, proving these weren't static monuments but evolving texts rewritten with each generation's discoveries. Most poignant are the recently uncovered family groups, clusters of smaller Moai buried chest deep around larger central figures, their torsos depicting interlocking hands or shared symbols. DNA analysis of skeletal remains nearby confirmed these groupings often matched biological kinship, with petroglyphs echoing specific clan histories. The largest central figures, it seems, weren't just rulers or gods, they were literal family trees, stone archives of lineage and lore. What emerges is a radical reinterpretation of the Moai. They weren't aloof idols, but participants in an unbroken dialogue between past and present. Every glyph, every layer of soil, every pigment stain whispers the same truth: these statues lived. They grew with their people, sank roots into the land, and carried stories too precious to leave to chance. And now, thanks to trowels and technology, we're finally learning to read them. High in the frozen reaches of the Himalayas, Rupkund Lake holds a gruesome secret: hundreds of ancient skeletons scattered along its shores and submerged in its icy waters. For decades, this eerie skeleton lake fueled speculation about a single catastrophic event wiping out an entire group, perhaps a doomed pilgrimage or a freak hailstorm. But when scientists extracted DNA from the bones, the truth proved far stranger than fiction. the skeletons weren't all from the same time period or even the same part of the world. Instead, they told two distinct stories separated by 1,000 years. The first group belonged to the 9th century locals from South Asia, likely caught in a deadly alpine storm. Isotope analysis of their bones revealed diets rich in millet and rice, typical of the region at the time. Many showed skull fractures consistent with hailstones the size of cricket balls, supporting local folklore about a goddess unleashing iron balls from the sky. But the second group upended everything. Radiocarbon dating placed their deaths in the 19th century, and their DNA traced back to the Eastern Mediterranean, modern-day Greece or Crete. These were travelers, not pilgrims, with protein signatures showing diets heavy in seafood and olives. How did they end up dying together in this remote Himalayan past? The Mediterranean group's presence is the real enigma. Some researchers propose they were part of a failed mercenary mission or a lost trading expedition, though no historical records mention such a venture. Others suggest they might have been employed by a regional ruler, given 19th century accounts of European advisors in Himalayan courts. What's certain is their journey ended violently. Several skeletons bear unhealed blade wounds, hinting at conflict rather than natural disaster. The lake might have been a battleground or perhaps a final refuge for wounded stragglers succumbing to exposure. Meanwhile, the two groups' fates intertwine in unexpected ways. Both sets of remains show signs of deliberate burial customs, some skeletons arranged in careful patterns, others surrounded by artifacts like spears and jewelry. This wasn't random death, it was ceremonial farewell. The lake, it seems, became a sacred resting place across cultures and centuries, a natural tomb drawing the lost and the fallen to its shores. The real breakthrough came when scientists realized the lake's unique conditions had preserved more than bones. Fragments of clothing clung to some skeletons, woolen shawls dyed with madder root, leather shoes stitched with Mediterranean-style lacing. Even strands of hair survived, some bearing genetic markers for rare hereditary conditions still found in Crete today. The lake didn't just hold bodies, it held identities, waiting for science to piece them back together. What makes Rupkan's story so compelling isn't just the solved mystery, it's the lingering questions. Why were Mediterranean travelers here at all? Did they interact with local communities before their deaths? And how many more stories lie buried in the world's remote corners, waiting for the right tools to uncover them? The skeletons of Rupkan remind us that history isn't a single narrative, but countless threads woven together by time, chance, and the relentless curiosity of those who refuse to let the past stay silent. The skeletons of Rupkan Lake didn't just tell a story of who died, they revealed exactly how. When forensic anthropologists examined the skull fractures on the 9th century remains, a chilling pattern emerged. Over 30 skulls bore nearly identical trauma, short, deep cracks radiating from the crown, like eggshells struck from above. These weren't battle wounds or falls, they matched injuries seen in modern hailstone fatalities. But for hailstones to crack human skulls, they'd need to be terrifyingly large softball-sized projectiles falling at over 100 miles per hour. That's where the ice cores came in. Scientists drilling into nearby Himalayan glaciers uncovered climatic snapshots spanning millennia. In layers corresponding to the 9th century, they found an anomaly, microscopic air bubbles enriched with isotopes signaling an abrupt, violent storm system. Even more telling were embedded mineral particles identical to those found in the skull fractures. This wasn't just climate data, it was forensic evidence frozen in time. The lake sits at 16,000 feet, directly beneath a high-altitude wind tunnel where supercell storms can form with little warning. One fateful summer day, a group of pilgrims or traders likely found themselves trapped in the open as the sky turned lethal. The Mediterranean group's remains tell a different tale. Their bones show no hail damage instead. Many exhibit healed fractures from prior combat along with unhealed stab wounds. Ice cores from their era reveal no extreme weather, but pollen analysis paints a grim picture. Sediment layers show a sudden spike in pine and birch pollen species that flourish after landslides or avalanches. Combined with skeletal evidence of malnutrition, the data suggests these travelers may have been caught in a high-altitude disaster, perhaps an avalanche sealing a mountain pass, leaving them stranded without supplies. Starvation and infighting could explain the violent trauma, with the lake becoming their final refuge. What makes Rupkund unique is how these tragedies intersect. Both groups succumb to the Himalayas' unforgiving moods, one to its skies, the other to its earth. Modern mountaineers know this duality well. The same peaks that dazzle with beauty can turn deadly in minutes. The lake's icy waters preserved more than bones. They captured moments of raw confrontation between humans and nature, separated by centuries but united by geography. Paleoclimatology adds another twist. Ice cores show the 9th century storm occurred during a warmer, wetter phase, a climatic sweet spot that may have drawn more travelers into vulnerable high-altitude routes. The 19th century group, by contrast, trekked during the Little Ice Age's tail end, when glaciers were advancing and passes grew treacherous. Their fates reflect not just random misfortune, but the hidden rhythms of a changing planet. Standing at Rupkund today, you're not just looking at a graveyard. You're witnessing a natural archive where every skeleton, every ice layer, every pollen grain adds a syllable to a story written across millennia. Science hasn't just solved these deaths, it's given them context, showing how climate and culture collide in the world's highest places. The real revelation isn't that people died here, but that their stories survived, waiting for us to listen. For centuries, the lost city of Tenya existed only in whispers, a settlement supposedly founded by Trojan prisoners after the fall of Troy, mentioned in ancient texts but never found. Historians debated whether it was real or just another myth layered onto Greece's legendary past. Then, in 2018, a team wielding ground-penetrating radar uncovered something extraordinary beneath an unassuming olive grove near Corinth. The scans revealed streets, buildings, and even an entire bath complex hidden just beneath the surface, perfectly preserved under layers of sediment. This wasn't just any ruins. The layout matched descriptions of Tenya from Pausanias, a 2nd century traveler who wrote of its grandeur. What sealed the discovery wasn't just the architecture, but the pottery. Among the first artifacts unearthed were storage jars stamped with the word Tenyan, in bold Greek letters, direct proof the city had not only existed but thrived as a distinct political entity. Even more compelling were the designs themselves, motifs blending Mycenaean and Trojan artistic styles, exactly what you'd expect from a city founded by displaced Trojans adopting Greek culture. Archaeologists held shards decorated with pomettes and lotus flowers, designs rare in mainland Greece but common in the Troy region. Here was material evidence of a hybrid identity, a community straddling two worlds. The real surprise came when excavations reached the necropolis. Burial sites contained gold diadems resembling those from Troy's elite tombs, alongside Greek-style weapons and jewelry. DNA analysis of skeletal remains added another layer. Some individuals showed genetic markers linking them to Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, while others were clearly local. This wasn't just legend, it was genetic proof of a blended population, exactly as the ancient stories described. Ground-penetrating radar then mapped the city's astonishing reach, a sprawling metropolis with aqueducts, workshops, and even a theater, suggesting Tenya was far more than a backwater. Its strategic location on trade routes between Corinth and the Peloponnese explained its wealth. Coins minted in Tenya's name turned up in distant ports, bearing images of Apollo, the city's patron god. But the most poignant find was a child's grave containing a terracotta horse, a nod to the Trojan horse myth, perhaps, or simply a toy that whispered of cultural memory passed down through generations. Tenya's rediscovery flips the script on how we view myth and history. The city didn't just survive the fall of Troy, it flourished for centuries, adapting Greek customs while preserving its unique roots. Its eventual decline, traced through burnt layers and abandoned wells, aligns with historical records of Slavic invasions in the 6th century. Yet even in ruin, it endured, waiting for science to peel back the soil and reveal a truth more compelling than any legend. Sometimes, the stories we dismiss as fantasy are just history we haven't uncovered yet. The pottery shards unearthed at Tenia weren't just fragments of daily life, they were economic ledgers written in clay. When scientists subjected these broken vessels to neutron activation analysis, a technique that traces the elemental fingerprints of minerals, the results painted a map of commerce stretching across the ancient world. Each shard's unique blend of trace elements, rare earth metals, iron isotopes, even microscopic marine fossils acted like a postal code, linking them to specific clay deposits near Corinth, Mycenae, and as far away as Crete. The data revealed something extraordinary. Tenia wasn't just a stopover on trade routes. It was a powerhouse controlling the flow of goods between mainland Greece and the Aegean. Take the so-called Tenian amphorae, sturdy jars designed for transporting olive oil and wine. Their clay contained high levels of chromium and nickel, matching quarries near Corinth's ports. But here's the twist: many were found shattered in Mycenaean palaces, their contents presumably consumed by elites. The sheer volume suggests Tenia operated as a middleman, buying Corinthian products and marking them up for northern markets. Even more telling were the mineral signatures of smaller, delicate drinking cups. These bore traces of Attic clay but were glazed with a distinctive red slip only Tenian artisans used. It's as if the city took raw materials from Athens, added value through craftsmanship, then exported them as luxury items. This wasn't just trade, it was early economic branding. The real revelation came from underwater archaeology. Divers excavating shipwrecks off the Peloponnese found Tenian pottery mingled with Egyptian faience and Cypriot copper ingots. One sunken vessel's cargo manifest, preserved on a waterlogged clay tablet, listed Tenia as both origin and destination for goods like Tyrian purple dye and Anatolian obsidian. The city's strategic position, perched between the Corinthian Gulf and the Mycenaean highlands, allowed it to tax caravans moving in both directions. Soil samples from Tenia's harbors confirmed this, showing layers of crushed mollusk shells used as ballast from foreign ships. But the most vivid evidence of Tenia's wealth lies in its coins. Hoards discovered beneath collapsed buildings bear the city's emblem, a galloping horse, a nod to its Trojan roots, struck in silver mined from nearby Lavrion. Metallurgical analysis shows these coins circulated as far as Sicily and the Black Sea, their purity so trusted that merchants accepted them without weighing. One particularly worn specimen, found in a Thessalian marketplace, had been countermarked 14 times by different traders, a testament to how far Tenia's economic influence reached. What emerges isn't just a portrait of a prosperous city, but a living economic network. The pottery shards, the shipwrecks, the coins, they're all threads in a tapestry of enterprise that connected farmers, artisans, and sailors across the Mediterranean. Tenia didn't just survive its mythical origins, it thrived by turning its crossroads location into an empire of commerce, proving that sometimes the truest legends are written not in epics, but in the chemistry of clay and the weight of silver. From the celestial calculations hidden inside the Antikythera Mechanism to the economic secrets etched into Tenia's pottery, this journey through 25 solved mysteries reveals something extraordinary. History isn't just written in books, it's encoded in DNA, buried in soil isotopes, and whispered through ultraviolet light. Each breakthrough came not from a single discipline, but from the collision of fields we rarely think to connect. Chemists read the pigments of the terracotta army like ancient invoices, while linguists trained AI to hear lost languages in the Voynich Manuscript's cryptic symbols. Botanists decoded pollen trapped in Ötzi's gut to reconstruct his final meal, and physicists mapped Stonehenge's stones as if they were tuning forks in a grand prehistoric instrument. The most stubborn myths crumbled when experts stopped working in isolation and started speaking each other's languages. What unites these discoveries isn't just the thrill of solving puzzles, it's the humility they demand. The Baghdad battery forces us to question when electricity was first harnessed. Rupkun's skeletons rewrite Himalayan migration timelines. Even the Shroud of Turin, still suspended between faith and science, reminds us that some artifacts refuse to fit neatly into categories. Every breakthrough begins with the same revolutionary idea. Maybe we've been asking the wrong questions. Now it's your turn. With LiDAR peeling back jungle canopies and algorithms reconstructing shattered texts, we're entering archaeology's golden age. Which enigma should science tackle next? The location of Alexander the Great's lost tomb, the purpose of Japan's underwater Yonaguni monuments, the truth behind the Indus Valley script that's defied translation for millennia. The tools are ready, we just need the next generation of interdisciplinary detectives to wield them. So tell us in the comments, where should the searchlight of modern science shine next? Because if history has taught us anything, it's that no mystery stays buried forever. Not when curiosity teams up with technology, and certainly not when viewers like you keep pressing play on the past.